Okay, ready to go?
Yeah.
Brill. So Una, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on to chat to us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Well, I mean, it's great to see you again because we obviously met back last year in the storytelling workshop at Queen's. So I can't wait to hear what you've been up to since then.
Busy.
I have seen on your LinkedIn, you've been very, very busy doing a lot of stuff, but all really exciting stuff. So I can't wait to hear about it. So Una, as a construction carbon associate, very fancy title, I will say. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Felix O'Hare?
So Felix O'Hare are a building contractor based here in Northern Ireland, and we work in both Northern Ireland and Ireland. As a construction carbon associate, I'm looking at the whole life carbon impact of our projects. It means we take account of the materials that we use on site, the waste that we produce, and how we operate as a business and the impact it has on the environment. We build everything from universities to hospitals. We built this building that we're in at the minute that was just handing over as I started, so I was kind of involved in the last few weeks of it, which was brilliant. We've just finished Riddle Hall as well for Queen's, so we do really high-end large scale projects, education, healthcare and commercial as well, and we work throughout the country.
Oh, that's amazing. And what's sort of your day-to-day like?
I'm gonna say it, no 2 days are the same, definitely.
Really?
We kind of range from being in our head office in Newry or else being out on site, which is brilliant. It's kind of good to break the week up like that. There's two elements to what I do, and one is more corporate focused and one is more project specific. Corporate wise, we're looking at just the environmental impact of the business, and it could be any business, but for Felix O'Hare, it's the diesel that we use, the vehicles that we have, the electricity that we use and where it comes from. And part of that was we signed a commitment through business in the community here in Northern Ireland to reduce our emissions by 30% by 2030, and we've been working on that. We've got an application at the minute for a solar system in our head office. It'll reduce our electricity consumption. We have on site generators which use diesel, but we've connected them to a battery system. It cuts the diesel usage by like litres and litres every single month, which then cuts the carbon. We're looking at about 8 tonne of carbon saving per month per generator now, which is incredible.
Wow.
The other side of that then is the project specific, and it's where then we look at the whole life carbon impact of our projects. And we work a lot with our clients, with our design team and with our waste contractors. We look at the materials that go to site, where they're coming from, how they're manufactured, the materials that go into them, and if there's a sustainable alternative that we could procure, we'll go for that. But we have to understand the whole life impact of that product and how that then feeds into the project. So I do a lot of carbon accounting on different softwares. We track the emissions, and then we see that there is possible for emission reduction if we went with an alternative, and then that can be applied to the next project, or we can go back to the client and see if that's something that they're willing to change or swap out.
Brilliant. And could you talk a little bit about what you're currently working on? So what's the main focus of your project at the moment?
Yes, so there is new industry standards coming through, and one of them is the Institute of Chartered Surveyors. They've published a new methodology for calculating whole life carbon. They're hoping that this will be integrated into the building regulations. They haven't given us a definite date for that, but if that was brought into building regulations, it would mean that our projects have to comply with a limit on the carbon at design stage. And then as constructors, we have to then build to that limit and not overstep it. So we're trying to work out at the minute across the projects how that methodology can be applied, the data that's available at the minute. So I work a lot with our supply chain. I reach out to our suppliers and say, do you have data related to your product? And a lot of times they do, and sometimes they don't. And what we want in Northern Ireland is better quality of data and more data, so that whenever it comes to us, we're able to accurately measure the carbon on our projects. So for example, we have a project at the minute which is a school which is going to for 1,300 pupils in Cookstown, and we're putting it through the methodology and trying to see where the data gaps are, so that then in a couple of years time we can be working with the supply chain so that when the regulations come in they have that data available. We're actually, Rick's had reached out to me following my conference in Queen's, and they wanted a bit more feedback about it. So we're in talks with them as well to see how it is affecting contractors in Northern Ireland. At times what I found is that everything is UK wide lumped in, and Northern Ireland's such a niche little market that it doesn't always apply to us as readily as it would to England, Scotland or Wales. There is suppliers here who are a lot smaller than those in England, and they don't have the time or the resources to be developing this data that I need. So we're trying to work with them and kind of lessen the burden and provide them with what the steps they need to take or how they can start doing it and the training. So that's been the recent work.
Wow, I mean that's all really incredible. But I guess, how are you finding just being a KTP associate? Like, are you enjoying the experience with all of this?
I love it. It is possibly the most random job because you just don't really know which way it's going to go, as much as the work plan is so specific and so detailed that they produced at the start. So when I started with Felix O'Hare, the work plan was there and it basically detailed month by month what was expected and what the company wanted from the project and what the academics wanted to get from the project, which is so brilliant. But there's also a little bit of room that as this has progressed through the 2 years, we've had to tweak and shift things. We've seen that we've completed things a lot quicker than we thought, or other things have taken a lot longer. And where there's difficulties, so as I'd said about the data gaps, it wasn't just as straightforward as we initially thought it was going to be to get data off our suppliers. So then we had to kind of revise a little bit and say, right, we need to work with the supply chain now. That has to be the focus for the next month or two and get the feedback there. But it is really interesting. I love the combination of both academia and industry. I love that the research isn't siloed in an academic institution. And such a big part of it that Felix O'Hare wanted was this information to be translated into something that a site manager could read, something that somebody who is not going to read a full thesis or 20,000 page document, they're not going to look at that. They have no time to be looking at that. So it was trying to work out that, right, I can write this research paper and it's really interesting, but what is actually important? What will apply to industry today? How can it save them money? How can it save them time? How can it manage risk on site as well? So trying to translate that data has been so interesting. Part of what we did last year was I developed a training program over 8 weeks.
Oh, incredible.
Delivered it to everybody in our teams. So it was carbon conversations, and they came in over 8 weeks. Instead of doing it a full 8 hours worth in one day, we broke it down. We kind of looked at different bits, and we showed everybody that their role was so important for my project. There was nobody who kind of gets to take a step back from sustainability. It has to be embedded, and I was able to give people that kind of empowerment that they are able to then have such a massive influence on the environment. So globally, the construction sector accounts for 40% of global emissions every single year. And what I was able to show a quantity surveyor or an engineer was, you don't have to make those big sacrifices in your personal life if you're able to make these incredible differences within your professional life, and the impact is so much greater. So everyone kind of bought into it, and there's been such a big culture shift. And it means everyone does get involved, and they want to know what I'm doing, and they want to know how they can help or what they can be doing better within their own projects. They also all get a bit competitive. So it's like, I save this much diesel, I save this many tons of carbon. And then that's brilliant, because you need that. You need everyone kind of bouncing off each other, and the competitive edge is always good in construction, I find.
Very nice. I mean, it's great to hear how proactive you're being within your project at the moment. And how would you say KTP has helped prepare you for this?
KTP it's brilliant. It's good to have both the academic and the industry supervisor there to bounce ideas off, because sometimes you can feel working in the environmental sphere, and especially the niche of environmental construction, that you're all on your own. You just feel like you're screaming into a void, that how is nobody else seeing the monumental impact that this is having. So having both those two perspectives has been brilliant, because you can say, well, if we were able to change this, it would have this impact. And the academics say, well, that's brilliant. And there's this piece of research and this piece of research which has shown that in a different context or in a different way. The industry then are able to say, right, well, we can do that on site, and that can be implemented tomorrow, or, you know, that's not contractually able to happen, or the client has to approve that. And KTP is brilliant because there is a lot of then freedom kind of to do this research, and it is cutting edge. Nobody else is really doing this at the minute. It's a gap in the industry in terms of data and in terms of initiative to actually go and do it. So we're seeing the real world impact of what we're doing.
Which is incredible. Like, that's exactly what you want to see when you're putting so much into a project. You want to be able to see all the impact that it's having. But also with KTP, as we know that they have a training and travel budget as well.
Yeah.
How would you say this has helped you within your project?
It's been brilliant. So
Yeah.
last year I had done some research on green building rating systems, and I was then able to go to Leeds and present the findings of this research at
Incredible.
the ORCOM conference. I'm not going to even butcher what that acronym stands for. There's so many of them. But it was really then interesting to. I was traveled over to Leeds. My academic supervisors came as well, but then I got to jump into different sessions and hear other people and their presentations and what research they were doing and different parts. So this is a global conference. There was people over from China, there was people from India, there was people from across the UK and Ireland as well, and some of them were addressing sustainability or addressing the circular economy or addressing, you know, specifically looking at concrete or looking at steel or the disassembly and the end of life of construction projects. And it was incredible for me to be able to see that, because I sometimes felt that I was just working on my own in a little project over here in Northern Ireland, and you get to see the whole the reach of what sustainability in construction is actually at the minute. The travel budget as well has allowed me to be more involved in the south. So we have projects down there. I started collaborating with the Irish Green Building Council because of our projects and was able to travel down to some of their conferences. I got in contact with one of the heads of the Irish Green Building Council, who's trying to develop their own methodology down there, which will apply to the building regulations in the south. And they were able to give me the methodology to trial out, to see how it fit, to see again where the data gaps are. And it's brilliant because we now have that understanding of both the Irish and the UK system, which a lot of people won't have.
Yeah.
And we can kind of embed the principles into the business that if these do get put into law or into regulations, we're ahead of the industry. We're able to do this quickly, and it means then when the client comes looking for a contractor to build a project, they know that we're able to achieve this and meet these standards. As well, the development budget for KTP is brilliant. I've done so many different training courses and
I love that.
possibly they weren't, so my academics and my industry supervisors have been brilliant, and they've really trusted me to be making these decisions and lead the project. So I am the project leader, but they are definitely there to help and support. So most recently I did the Passive House training course through Southwest College, and I was able to get that part funded through the KTP, and it was brilliant because it's not specifically looking at the materials that are used in construction projects. It's looking at the energy efficiency over the life and how you actually achieve that. Queen's actually, I think, are hoping to build Passive House into their tender requirements.
Ooh.
So they want now new projects coming through to be this Passive House standard. So I'm now a certified Passive House consultant, and we're trying to get more in our business to go through this process as well. Passive House is basically the highest level of energy efficiency of a building. It would mean it costs nothing to heat or cool or run the building over its lifespan. And that means that there's no environmental impact on the day of handover until the end of life. There's no energy used to heat that building. It's all done through air source heat pumps, and the air is recycled and the heat is then retained within the building. It's incredible what they're able to achieve. What I find most beneficial is that understanding that, the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, okay, but what's the embodied carbon impact? What's the materials that have to go into it? What happens at the end of life? And having the two sides of that knowledge is brilliant, because that's what we need. We can't focus on one or the other, looking just at materials and then sacrificing efficiency over the lifespan, because that 40% of global emissions, it counts for both. It's both the materials and the lifespan of the building, and we have to take account of both, or we won't reach net zero by 2050 or ever.
100%. It's so incredible to hear how your KTP project is directly potentially changing the world, which is just
Hopefully.
incredible. But what does being a consultant mean? If we just break it down even more,
Yeah.
what does it all mean?
So I would basically have the knowledge to then project manage if we were to take on a Passive House certified project, that I have the understanding of how we achieve the 5 principles of Passive House, one of which is airtightness. It's like the fundamental, the building has to be airtight. There's a really high level of detail required of the contractor, but also of all the subcontractors and teams on site. And what you can find in construction is that one of the main issues or challenges is that you're always managing people, and there is hundreds of people on a project at any one time. They could be from every different country in the world. They could be from every different part of the industry. So you have specialists in glazing and specialists in insulation, and you have to make sure they all work together to achieve the principles of Passive House. So as a consultant, and hopefully if more people in our business then go through the consultancy process and become certified, we're able to deliver projects like this for Queens. We also want to encourage our design teams that we work with, so the architects, to then go through and become Passive House architects and Passive House designers. It means then when the two groups come together to start working, the potential is incredible. We can achieve real energy efficiency here, and with the embodied carbon side of it that Felix O'Hare and I have, we can achieve it while also reducing the upfront environmental cost of the project.
And how would you say this plays into your specific KTP project?
Yeah, so my KTP, while it is looking at whole life carbon and it's trying to measure accurately what the environmental impact of a project is, but there is such a huge lifespan of a building. So a building's, say, reference service period is 60 years. We're trying to take account of absolutely everything. So from the external of the project, from the second that we are appointed, and even before it, when we're just tendering for projects, we have to feed all this knowledge in. What we do around managing materials and the impact of them is that at tender stage, we're trying to work with the supply chain to say, if we put forward this project, how can we achieve this using your product? And it is difficult, but then also having that energy efficiency understanding throughout the life cycle of the project, we're able to bring all that knowledge in. We're able to bring the supply chain along with us. We're trying to embed that supply chain resilience so that there's a lot of SMEs within our supply chain, especially in Northern Ireland. It's also quite a limited supply chain. It's very small, and we always want to source locally. We want to embed that knowledge where they're starting to produce products then which are Passive House certified with a low embodied carbon impact and the actual verified data to go along with it. It'll open them up to a whole new market as well, and it'll bring them along that if these building regulations come in, they're ahead of the game. They are the key supplier, they're the key subcontractor that all the contractors are going to go to.
God, this is just so incredible because there's so many different intricate bits about what you're doing. How did you actually hear about this program? Like, could a certain podcast back in the day have helped at all in any way? But genuinely, like, how did you find out about the job?
Yeah, so before that, I had done my undergraduate and my master's in urban planning. I was really interested in the carbon impact of construction and of the built environment. And then when I graduated, it was COVID, so basically there was no jobs. My master's was entirely COVID, which really impacted kind of the whole uni experience. We had no field trips. Planning's great for field trips. We were in Barcelona the year before.
Oh no.
But I came out and I was like, what do I want to do? I was like 22. I had no clue about anything. I'd never even heard of KTP. I had no idea what it stood for. And I actually ended up moving to New York.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, so I was in New York when I applied for KTP. It came up on my LinkedIn. I'd heard of Felix O'Hare. I'd actually, in the previous firm I'd worked for, we'd done a bit of work with them supplying materials. So I knew they were a really good firm, and I was so interested that this was what they were going for. Kind of the whole life carbon thing wasn't something I'd heard of or understood. I had focused through my degree on waste and the carbon impact of waste. So I did my thesis on the carbon cost of managing waste in Northern Ireland and the role of our rubbish as we strive for net zero. I'm really interested kind of in resource management and waste, and that's such a big part of what I do now. So I was scrolling on LinkedIn, probably in Central Park, and seen the KTV, and I happened to be coming home then for a family wedding. So I sat in JFK Airport and applied for the job. And
that's so cool though.
Yeah, I interviewed when I got home, and I was like, I actually couldn't pass up the opportunity. Whenever they chatted about whenever I actually looked up what KTP was, and then in the interview they expect you to do a presentation. Ooh. Yeah, right off the bat, they're like straight in here. They were like, explain what embodied carbon is, explain what whole life carbon is, and I was kind of scrambling a bit, but I was like, no, I'll do this, it'll be grand. Yeah. They were so lovely in the interview. I was probably shocked that I got it, but I am so thankful that I did, because it really is such a different job than I would ever have probably put myself forward for had it not been a KTP. Yeah. And they were brilliant that they said there is so much of a training budget here and a development budget that if there's some wee area of this job that you are not comfortable with yet or not wholly versed with, you can go and do the training in that area.
Oh, brilliant.
Which is so good. And
Yeah.
the other thing is, I was able to kind of bring a different perspective to KTP in terms of, I wasn't an engineer, so I wasn't so focused on one thing. As a planner, I definitely take the systems approach to everything.
Nice.
And you need to do that with whole life carbon. You have to kind of zoom out of the project and say, what's the bigger impact here? Where does the supply chain fit in? At the minute, actually, and tomorrow I'm down with the Institute of Civil Engineers actually in Queen's.
Exciting.
Yeah, so the head of the Institute of Civil Engineers in Northern Ireland contacted me about what they were doing. So it's a new framework. It's called Past 2080, and it's the carbon management in infrastructure and buildings. They just released a new one which includes buildings, and
Very
this
nice.
is kind of exactly what I have been looking for, which is that overall framework. It's focused on the business and what the business does and how the business can embed these carbon management principles, also how the client can embed them into the project, how the designer can embed them. So no project can be past 2080 certified, but the businesses. And it means then if we were to work with a designer who also had this past 2080 framework embedded in their own business, we know that the building that we're going to create based on their design will meet these embodied and operational carbon targets, which is great.
Incredible, yeah.
So at the Queen's Sustainable Building Conference, I'd spoke about what we were doing and the work and the data gaps, and then the Institute of Civil Engineers reached out and they said, we'd love you to come and chat about Past 2080. What I said was, we haven't got that framework in place yet. We're looking at it and we're trying to embed the principles, but we're not certified. And they went, that's perfect. We want to understand kind of what the challenges are that the contractor's facing, and maybe where there needs to be more training or initiatives so that the contractor can feel comfortable going for Past 2080 and working with the clients and the subcontractors and the designers.
Oh, I mean, it really sounds like you're setting the pace for here in Northern Ireland and beyond, which is just incredible. But sort of look back, obviously in hindsight, there's so many incredible opportunities that you've been able to do because of KTP. But was there anything beforehand that really stood out to you as to why you wanted to apply for this?
I just loved the idea that it was a small building contractor. So Felix O'Hare are relatively small. We don't work across in the UK. And I thought they're taking this initiative on something in the industry that is not being done. And they're going down the KTP route, which is probably different. Like, a lot of people maybe don't know about KTP, or they wouldn't be comfortable bringing on a KTP associate to manage something like this. So I was like, I'm really interested to work with them and see kind of what their outlook on environmental construction is and why they're kind of pushing for it. And the project itself is so cool. And once then they gave me the work plan as well, and there was just so many different bits of it that I was like, oh, I could do this here and I could do this here. And they actually already had a really good foundation for the project to be started on. They had done a lot of work previously, again, a lot more than maybe the industry was requiring them to do, but they were really pushing forward. And one of my industry supervisors is Mark Campbell, who's our contracts director. He is brilliant. He is so involved. He can just, it's almost as if he can see the future and he sees these things coming in.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
He's thinking future.
He's so good like that. And he's like, right, building regulations might not change for 10 years, but we don't care. We are putting the investment and the time and the resources into this now to see what the actual impact is environmentally as well as cost. So a big element of the KTP is that it has to have a financial benefit to the business to be justified. They were kind of keen to say, well, KTP should be about more than just making money for the company. And we were able to show like the environmental impact, the impact we've had on the industry here in terms of like the different speaking engagements I've been involved in. And the industry's been brilliant at coming back and quick fire questions.
Oh,
and
incredible.
They'll challenge you and they'll say, well, how does this apply to me? Actually at the Sustainable Building Conference, there was a structural engineer and she went, I don't think you understand. We don't have that much scope within our projects to influence whole life carbon. I went, yes, you do.
Yeah.
You have a client there in front of you. You have the knowledge that they don't. You have to start pushing. And that was kind of my call to action for a lot of people. I said, stop sitting back and waiting for a regulation to come into place. Start acting now in the same way that Felix O'Hare are doing. Whether it's getting a KTP, whether it's just starting understanding your corporate carbon footprint, but then you have to widen that out to the impact you can have on a project by project basis. And there's been such brilliant feedback from that. And I'm actually going in now to a structural engineering firm on Tuesday. They want a bit of help and guidance. One of the biggest things we found, the feedback from the industry is, what's the first step that we have to take here? And mine is just start having the conversation. Ask your director, ask your manager, what's your feelings on this? What are we going to do? What's the business going to do? What's the 10-year plan? And once people start talking, they do understand that they have a role and that they have so much power and that they can make these changes. It won't cost them an arm and a leg, but the impact is huge.
So, and of course, you have experience working for your family business. Now, how did this contribute to your interest in sustainability and low carbon construction?
I was basically raised in the industry, so
I
my earliest memory is literally being in the lorries with my daddy on a Saturday and driving around and getting to see the whole country. And I think from then I had such a deep appreciation for how important construction was. So we're from County Tyrone, we're from a really rural area. Like, so much of the employment opportunities in that area are in construction. So many construction companies are family owned and they're small and they've retained kind of the family element of them. So I kind of knew I always wanted to work within that area. But I think throughout school I just had such an interest in sustainability and sustainable development and the interaction between people and place and planet, and the fact that a lot of the time people seem to remove themselves from the equation where, you know, the planet is separate to us, but it's not, and we have to kind of work collaboratively there. So whenever I was old enough to start answering phones, that was probably about 11 years old, Daddy would have me in the office and I'd be chatting to people, and I loved that element of, like, you're chatting to a contractor or you were chatting to a farmer who was putting up a shed or something. Yeah. So from like a really early age, I was just chatting to people, finding out what they were up to, taking orders, and then getting the lorries out on the road. I have a deep appreciation for logistics planning and stuff. So
I love that.
Yeah, I just loved being down there, and I come from a really big family. There's 8 kids in my house.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
okay.
And we've all served our time working there at different points of our lives. So and I have a really big extended family, and a lot of us work there as well. It's brilliant. My granda started the business back in the 50s or 60s. Him and my granny working together, and they've built this business just from the ground up. And then my daddy took it over, and now my brother, he's taken it over. So it's on to the next generation, which is brilliant. But when I started working there properly, I was working with quality control management. So ensuring that all the products complied with the relevant BSI standards, and that what we were giving out to the customer was the best product it could be. Because this was going into their house, this was going into their farm. It was, these products then go into a building which lasts 100 years, which is incredible, and it's all within the local area. And I loved working in construction. I loved the buzz of it. I actually find it really difficult sometimes being in an office. I like the background noise of just, you know, machines moving and stuff.
Yeah.
But I knew I didn't want to go down the engineering route because probably I don't love maths enough.
No, that's that.
Yes. I can do it, I just don't love doing it.
Yeah.
And I actually went to the Queen's Open Day and ended up doing planning, and then I was like, well, this is still, it all ties in, which is brilliant. But back to my family, so we do quarry products and we do concrete products, and there is such a huge environmental impact from them, and there was always a lot of kind of negativity around concrete, and they'll go, oh, it's the worst material you can use, it's so carbon intensive, we should look at timber, we should look at whatever else. But my justification was, we don't have a sustainable timber source here in Northern Ireland. So what, we're going to go ruin a forest somewhere that doesn't need to be ruined to build some timber houses which don't last as long. Now, I'm still an advocate for timber, but it has to be sustainably managed.
100%.
Yeah, and we have the infrastructure there for concrete production. The biggest element of carbon in concrete is the cement, and we've got cement suppliers here in Northern Ireland who supply all over the UK and the South, and they're working towards decarbonisation. So they're taking such a huge chunk of the impact out already. We've got Manic out in Fermanagh, and they're doing incredible work. They've created their own energy efficiency village where each system powers another. If they can decarbonise cement, concrete then already is decarbonised to an extent, and it's a product which is so versatile, and it can be used in so many different functions, and it lasts for so long, and it's just a brilliant product to work with as well. And you'll find anyone will say that, and people on sites understand it and they know how to work with it, as opposed to throwing this new product in a mix which is sustainable and then nobody knows how to work it or get the best value from it. So I was always kind of keen then. I was working with my daddy and my brother to see what we could do within the quarry and within the concrete yard to make it a bit more sustainable. I have qualms about the word sustainable, but I'm going to use it anyway.
Okay.
But we looked at energy efficiency measures. We looked at what we could do. The big thing was cutting down on our diesel usage, so making sure everything was running super efficiently so that we were cutting down diesel. We have no lorries sitting idle. We only supply locally anyway, which is just the nature of a concrete plant, and it's all going to local suppliers. So it was talking to them and saying we need to make sure the lorries aren't, you know, sitting waiting and they're burning diesel for no reason. So I seen the impact that you can have on even just a small scale with these little things that don't impact anyone's working day, but they do make a major environmental impact when added up over a year. So I knew that I wanted to then stay in the industry. I kind of always wanted to go down that route.
There's certainly a widespread perception that in the construction industry, it's predominantly male dominated. Could you share with us your unfiltered perspective on navigating the industry as a woman?
I always remember whenever my granny passed away, so she had started the business with my granda, they said, Joe made the blocks, but Bessie made the money. And I remember being like,
that.
I love it. I was never told from any age that I couldn't have worked in this industry. In fact, I was actively encouraged to stay within it. So I definitely didn't know that there was a issue with women in construction or women in any male dominated industry. I had no clue of it growing up. And like, I'd worked with my sisters and my aunties and my granny and everybody within that business. I just thought that was the norm. And then whenever I sort of got involved with the KGP and I was working on building sites, I kind of did notice it. I was looking around, and even within Felix O'Hare, there's not that many women. One of the main issues that women in the industry talk about is the fact that when they're underrepresented on sites, you know, sometimes the facilities aren't there for them whenever they do get there. So you have to ask for a key to use the toilets, because if there is a female toilets, which you're lucky to get, our sites all have them, which is brilliant. But sometimes women get to site and there's no toilet, or else the toilet has to be kept locked at all times, otherwise it will go in and be wrecked, which I don't get either. But there's a big movement within the industry to try and address a lot of these problems. So in Felix O'Hare, there is definitely an underrepresentation of women. There isn't a lot of women going for these roles because they have this perception of the industry that is, it's dirty and it's noisy and it's rude and it's not for women, and it does put people off. Now obviously I kind of grew up through it, and I was probably just unaware of how someone who hasn't grown up through the industry would perceive it. One of the brilliant things that Felix O'Hare do, and a lot of contractors do, is that they are part of the Consider It Constructor scheme. And it's really good. So it's UK wide, and it's built into our public sector contracts that we have to comply with this. We've been brilliant. We've got top marks across.
Excellent.
But one of the requirements is that you put the facilities in place, that you have correct PPE for women. It is amazing. It is actually mind-boggling that nobody thought that PPE had to be designed to fit a woman's body. You can't just be given the male version in a smaller size.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Like, baffling that these people can construct these incredible buildings, but they couldn't think of that. So that was brought into the Consider Constructor scheme only this year, that is a requirement. Yes.
Oh my
the start of 2024. I know.
Okay. Well, these changes starting to happen then, but...
And they're also addressing other issues with the likes of providing sanitary products and sanitary waste facilities in women's bathrooms, but then also in male bathrooms, providing some similar type of bins as well, so that there is so many issues that people could have, and people deserve a safe space. They deserve a clean toilet to be able to use, and the facilities that they need just to complete their job. That these shouldn't be, you know, a brilliant thing that we're doing. They should be the industry norm. They should be the norm across all industries. But working as a woman in the industry, I've never actually encountered any major problem. I have to say the staff at Felix O'Hare are incredible, and they were so welcoming and so welcome of my project, which could be seen as kind of, you know, go do that in the corner and don't involve us. It doesn't impact our daily activities. But they weren't. The site managers were all like, come on, get involved, this is brilliant. What do we do? What do you need from us? So there is definitely an issue in the industry, but there is so many people doing such great work to address these industries. One of the key is one of the key players within Northern Ireland is the Construction Industry Training Board here.
Very nice.
So they recently hosted the Women in Construction Summit. They host training days for women. They do actually plant operative training specifically for women to get women into roles like driving a digger, driving a dumper, which definitely don't get advertised to women in the way that they should. And why not? There's actually in Australia at the minute, because so many Irish people go out and work out there in the mines, they actually have said that women are better at operating the heavy plant and machinery. They're less likely to treat the machinery poorly. The machinery then stays intact and it costs less in maintenance because the women are better drivers.
Well,
Yeah, I know, there you have it. But like across the world, there is this global movement where more women are coming into the industry. But even within Northern Ireland, I think we only make up 15% of females within the industry, and I think only 1% are actually in trades. So that's the like of electricians or bricklayers. Nobody is advertising those to women. And what the Construction Industry Training Board have said, and what actually talking to different ones in the industry have said, is that we need to get in at third year level to girls in school and start promoting construction as a career choice, because it's at that stage when you're starting to maybe think about GCSEs or think about doing BTECs that you kind of have to have that drive towards construction so that you can, you know, tailor your subjects to suit it. But if you don't think that that's for you at that age, then that is embedded in you throughout. And if people tell you, oh, construction's not for women, you're not going to go down that route. But there is such a world of opportunity within construction. My role probably didn't exist 10 years ago. It probably didn't exist 5 years ago. People weren't looking at this, but there is so many different facets of construction that you can get into.
No, that's really, really interesting. I do remember sort of back in year 8, year 9, like taking the quiz of what career do you want to do, and I never saw anything like construction. Although it was always like hospitality or acting or something like that, which nothing wrong with that either, but it's just better to have more of a widespread sort of options to look at and to consider as a career. But what message would you give to female graduates who are thinking of a career in construction but a bit apprehensive about it?
I would say don't let the fear of working on site put you off, because what you will find is that so many people on site are actually so helpful and they are incredible people. I would say you should get a mentor, 100%. You should try and find someone within the industry, even if it's not within your own company, to kind of guide you and help you navigate through any difficulties that do arise. What you're going to find though is they will probably be a male if it is someone in a high up position that you want to have that kind of feedback from, because we have an underrepresentation of women in high powered roles within construction and across most industries, unfortunately. There is a very dramatic lack of women within like the C-suite. So I would say don't let that put you off, because there is women here. We are so happy. Like, reach out to me, reach out to any other woman that you come across on LinkedIn. I'm not saying that they won't be busy or they'll have time just to, you know, sit and chat, but there is so many mentorship opportunities. So as I said about the Construction Industry Training Board, they offer a mentorship opportunity with other women within the sector. We actually hosted recently the Women in Construction Network at our site.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, so we had women from industry, we had women from academia come in, we had students come in who were completing their foundation degree, and they were able to see what site work's like, and they were able to go, well, this isn't as bad as I thought, and you know, there's a lovely office there, and I could be out on site, and yes, you'll be working in all weathers, but you'll have correct PPE to carry out your duties in that weather.
Oh, 100%. As in 2024.
Exactly. But I think that then the students being able to come on site and chat to me, chat to my colleagues. We had Joanne there, who's our health and safety assistant. I'm not sure what her actual job role is. She's in doing her placement with us. We had Orla, who's a site engineer, and she's completing her HLA through South Eastern Regional College. We had students in from them, and they were able to see Orla actually in action on a site, and it kind of then demystifies what working on a site's like, or working in construction. We also had women in who, you know, work in an office. They're 100% office based, and you can see that that is still a potential career opportunity if the site work doesn't appeal to you.
100%. That's so fascinating to hear about. But also just that change is actually happening in this sector, and there is definitely a space for women within construction. 100%. So now we're moving on to your development journey, and you've been taking up a lot of opportunities while you've been completing your KTP. So just to name a few: speaking at conferences, undertaking additional training and winning awards. Major congratulations, by the way, on all of them, but particularly the Young Changemaker of the Year award at the All Ireland Sustainability Awards in 2023. Long title, but very truly impressive. And it's just really inspiring to see such recognition, especially so early on in your career. But can you tell us a little bit about how you became nominated and what potentially earned you the award in the end?
So the All Ireland Sustainability Awards came off the back of the All Ireland Sustainability Conference, and it was businesses across the sector, it was different initiatives. They brought everybody together for a day. I think it was up in Belfast, and it was kind of a networking opportunity and learning off each other. And then from that, they've developed the awards to recognise people within the industry who are doing incredible work. So my work put me forward for the Young Changemaker of the Year award, which was so nice. It was really lovely, even just to be put forward for it or to be recognised within the business for the work that I was doing. It was a really lovely thing. And the awards night then, it was incredible to see the range of initiatives and different businesses that were there. We were at a table with a couple who own wild acres. Ooh. And they took all their savings out, bought a woodland and restored it. Oh, and they'd won a award as well, and it was for like best environmental initiative, and it was incredible. And going to events like that, whether it's the conference or it's the awards, you see how many people are taking action within this country, and it is so inspiring, and it reaffirms that what you're doing is important, but that other people are doing such amazing work as well within their own professional or personal lives. It takes the pressure off a little bit. It kind of calms the eco-anxiety where you kind of think, right, I don't have to save the world on my own.
There's a community there for you.
Yes,
as well,
and then you get to kind of chat to these people and you say, well, what worked, what didn't work, and you learn from them, and you say, well, this is something we could apply to construction and adapt and change it. On to the award, it was lovely to be recognised. There was actually a lot of the people that I was up against within the category were people that I already knew, that I had kind of followed on LinkedIn. A couple of them have been on the 30 under 30 climate change makers program with me. What they actually said at the awards night, the award was the carbon literacy training that I ran last year, and it was how the impact that we can have whenever we bring everybody on the journey together, whenever we train people, we translate carbon into the language that they can understand. And being a trailblazer and a woman in the industry, especially in the environmental construction industry, which is probably definitely underrepresented with women.
100%. And also, just speaking of the 30 under 30 climate change makers program, another incredible achievement. What was your experience like whilst in that program?
So that was the first year that they had ran it, and it was Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful. We're running it in conjunction with I can't remember what the acronym is, but they are US based, so they started the Climate Change Makers program over there, and then it was brought to countries across the world. So Jenna from Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful was leading it, and she's only a couple of years older than us, but she had done the sustainable degree through Queen's, the master's program, and she was then really keen to kind of get all these like-minded people together from different industries and get them chatting to each other. So 30 of us, obviously under 30. I started the program when I'd only just started my KTP.
Ooh,
which was a lot in a couple of months, but it was brilliant. They put us in a room together. We were doing so much work that wasn't maybe specific to construction, or it wasn't specific, to sustainability. It was more like, what's your why? Why are you in this industry? Why are you doing what you do? Because once you know your why, you know how then you can keep doing this whenever, times get tough, or you feel a bit disillusioned by the industry or by politicians, and how you keep going. They had incredible speakers in. They had Madlug in speaking, so they're the bag brand who donate a bag for every bag you buy to a child in care.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it was incredible. And the guy got up and he spoke about why he did this, and he said he's seen a child in care carrying all their worldly belongings in a black bin bag, and so he totally changed this child's life by giving them a bag that was, the bags are class, and KTP gave me one of the bags actually recently. It says KTP Madlug, so it's a really nice bag, but to know that whenever I'm carrying that and I'm going to site, that a child somewhere in care has a bag that they can, put all their stuff into, and they don't have to feel ashamed by it or embarrassed. It then means that when I'm in my job, I'm going, right, well, what impact can I have today? What can I do to, help somebody else or help the world? and it really does then reaffirm what you're doing. And the 30 under 30 program are brilliant for that. Hearing stories like that aren't always specific to sustainability are brilliant. You have to see that there's a big wild world out there. There's people who, you know, are really impacted by things day to day, and that the environment isn't always at the forefront of their mind. So some people say the end of the month comes before the end of the world. There is such a bigger system of issues here, and definitely the 30 under 30s in tandem with doing the KTP was what I needed. I needed to be able to understand why I was doing this so that I would keep doing it. And chatting to other people my own age was also brilliant, because I think sometimes I am working with people a lot older than me, and I kind of missed that. I missed just kind of being able to bounce ideas off people. And there was one other person who worked within construction, so it was great to hear their feedback and their perspective on what their business was doing. But then there was people who were doing AI, there was people in the food industry, there was people in hospitality, there was people in business, and we were able to all chat to each other and discuss these different things. And then it culminated in us doing a project. So my group did reusing vacant space in Belfast, because we understood that there's both a social and environmental issue around there being vacant derelict spaces. Buildings end up not being used, they go into disrepair, they get vandalised, the whole area then is brought down, and the community don't have that space then to use. So we rented out to Royal Avenue, which is the former Tesco building.
Oh, very nice.
Yes, for a day, and we had it with loads of different pop-up stands inside. So Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful did one. We had a Zine artist.
Ooh.
Yeah, so she came in and was taking people through the journey of Belfast, and what does disused space do, what does revitalisation mean to you, and people were able to design this on their own wee magazine, which was incredible.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, and we got like a really interesting cross-section of society into the building.
Yeah.
People who just stumbled in because there's a cafe in the back. We also put money behind it so that anyone that came in got a free drink for the day, because we didn't need the money for anything else, because the space was free to use. So it was so interesting, and we did a lot of research about why spaces are derelict and the funding and how you can use vacant space in Belfast city centre if you have an idea or you want to do something. And the city council do a lot of work. They got involved as well, and they were really keen to kind of understand what we had found from it or any of the suggestions that we had. So you could again see that there was an impact from this work, which is brilliant, because it will benefit society and it then will benefit the environment as well.
I mean, you're really setting the standard for future KTP associates here.
Yeah, KTP is definitely different to a standard job, and it kind of means then whenever you're in the business, you don't always have somebody else to turn to ask about specific KTP things. So when I started with Felix O'Hare, they had already done a previous KTP, and Will Adams had taken the business on the BIM journey. So he'd used a 2-year project and implemented BIM, and it meant then we were winning tenders and everything. So his KTP was so successful, and Felix O'Hare saw the benefit of it, that then it meant when my KTP started, people was already kind of bought into the idea. But I still kind of was trying to wrap my head around what KTP was. They were like, you have a training budget. I was like, well, how do I spend it? You know, where is this money?
The practicalities work out.
Yeah, what logistically does KTP mean for me over a 2-year period? So having Will, who'd already went through that process, right there, and I could just ask him questions, and I could say, you know, I'm writing a research paper and I'm hoping to present it at a conference. Is that something you did? Was brilliant. It just really eased my mind. And you are going into a project management role. This is your KTP project, and you are given so much resources and so much scope to do with it as you need to do, but just having someone there to ask questions. So bringing in this peer mentoring through the KTP is going to be incredible for everybody. Whenever we start KTP, we have to do 2 training courses over in England, and that was kind of where I had initially got chatting to other KTP people, and you know, some of them had only just started as well like me, and some of them were a bit further advanced, and again you could ask them questions and say, how are you getting on, like how are you finding this, what worked in your business and what didn't. So now the Queens are bringing this in a more formalised way. It's going to be brilliant for any new KTP people coming on, because I'm so happy now to share my thoughts and opinions and what I wish I could do different. If I could go back and do the 2 years again, there's so many other things that I would do, or so many things that I would say had to be done within the first couple of months that I maybe pushed off, or stuff that could have been pushed off that I try to do too quick. I think it's only whenever you're chatting to somebody else who's been through the same process, no matter what the project is, it really doesn't matter. It's more just having that sounding board and having someone to ask advice of and just chat to as well. KTP maybe can feel a bit lonely sometimes because you're going into this new business but your role is different to everyone else. I know there's companies with maybe a couple of KTPs at once, but they're probably few and far between. So being able just to chat to somebody and it's a friendly face or it's an email, it's just someone at the end of an email, definitely is such a vital thing, and it will really maybe improve the KTPs as well. People will they'll be able to settle into their business so much quicker. There'll be less kind of time where they're like finding their feet with KTP, and the projects then will be more successful because of it.
100%. You can so see the sort of influence that this will immediately have on KTP work, like for all the associates. But for you specifically, what influence did it have, or just having somebody to speak to whilst you're going through it all?
Massively. And I probably didn't understand KTP enough before I started the job. So that's on me, not on anybody else, but having Will there to chat to really settled me in, because starting a new job is so scary.
Oh really?
Yeah. So like, never mind starting a new job where your job role is totally different to everyone else's too, and you're leading a project. And like, I was 22 when I started. Like, I was so young. I was like a little baby out of university. Yeah. So having Will there to be able to ask the questions too was so important for me, and I definitely settled into Felix O'Hare a lot quicker than I would have done. Even just asking like, okay, I'm on site today, where do I eat my lunch, where do I go? All of those sort of things are so important. But then specific to the KTP, I was able to kind of read some of his research that he'd done, and I was like, right, this is the standards they're expecting of me. I was able to see how he interacted with people within our business, which was really interesting. He was like, right, you need to speak to this person if this is the change you need implemented, or this person has the data, find a way to utilize that data. So it definitely had such a positive impact on my project. And even then chatting to the other KTP associates when we went to England for the training course, it was also brilliant. Obviously myself and Will's project were both construction focused, but there was people there at the training in England who were like, they'd done their PhDs. So like, the scope of KTP is incredible. Yeah.
And it's amazing just hearing about everything that you've done so far since working on your project. You recently spoke at the 2024 WIC Summit and the Queen's University Sustainable Buildings Conference. But what's it like being invited to speak at these events about something that is so important to you?
I would say I had major imposter syndrome before the first one, 100%. I thought, I am so young and inexperienced, what does anyone want to hear what I have to say? And then whenever Queen's invited me to the Sustainable Building Conference, and there was amazing feedback from it, and I thought, you know what, I do actually have to keep up with this, because this is a new area of the industry. People aren't doing enough and aren't doing enough quick enough, but there is definitely that drive towards it. We just need to equip people to be able to do it. But the Sustainable Building Conference was incredible, and I actually remember whenever I got there, they weren't confirmed the numbers of attendees. They were like, we're aiming for 50, but like, we'll hope for the best, kind of. There was like 350.
Really?
Yeah, and my academic supervisor was there, and he was like, this is a bit of a bigger deal than I thought. And I was like, yeah, I'm so glad I didn't know any of this before. Yeah. Now I will say I don't really have a problem public speaking. Throughout school, I was definitely always nominated to speak for any different thing that we had, whether it was Fish. I was the head girl, so I was always doing speeches.
Love that.
And that's definitely a skill that the KTP can help you develop if you don't have that already. But because I had that, then I think they put me in those situations a lot quicker maybe than other people would feel comfortable. But being asked to speak at it's such a privilege to know that this research can have such a wide impact 100%. if the data is disseminated. And Felix O'Hare were so keen that, you know, they are not going to be just like holding all this information so that they're the contractor that people go to. They were like, shout about this from the rooftops if other people can get on board. And that was what was really back to kind of why I wanted to go for the KTP, and especially with Felix O'Hare, was I could see that from the very start that they were like, yes, this can be good for business, but this is bigger than that. This is going to be incredible. Being invited to speak at the Women in Construction Conference was honestly surreal. It was so lovely, because I thought if 16-year-old me could see me, I would be so proud right now. And it was brilliant, and there was so many incredible women in that room, and so many women then working within sustainability. So I was on the panel with Maria, who works for Sustain IQ, which is the software that we use, and her whole thing is like, we need the data. And she developed the software and has, you know, brought this into construction companies across the UK, and they're widening it out now. To see her and get chatting to her was incredible, because I'm like, that is like, that's what success looks like in this industry.
Yeah.
And she is the role model for that. So it was so interesting, and yeah, I enjoyed speaking at it. They put me on a panel, so I was on a panel with 3 others, and like they were asking questions and stuff, so it was interesting.
Oh my goodness, this is all so inspiring, and it's just so great as well, like so early on in your career, to hear you speak with such enthusiasm and such dedication. But you must be extremely passionate about what you do, and it really comes across.
Yeah, I love environmental construction, and I think there is such a big impact, and there is so much potential and so much that the industry can change for the better within the next like 5 to 10 years. Like, these changes are coming in thick and fast, and I hope to see it regulated. I hope to see policy put in place so that everybody, this, like, we set the standard here in the UK and Ireland for what sustainable construction looks like, and we can be the role model for the rest of the world. And we're seeing the rest of the world is coming along too, but I would love to see here, and especially in Northern Ireland, where it is small, it is SMEs, it's, you know, family run businesses, but if they were leading the world on sustainable construction, it would be incredible.
I love that you're already thinking future. Now, of course, the name of this podcast is Think Future, so it would be remiss for us to not discuss the future outlooks for both yourself in your career and also for Felix O'Hare and indeed the construction industry in terms of achieving net zero. So, Una, looking ahead to the future of the environmental development sector, especially in Northern Ireland, what trends do you foresee?
I think that within the next 5 years, we're going to see embodied carbon regulated within the industry, and that will be pivotal. It will actually change how we build, because it will mean that a client will only be able to finance a project or get planning approval on a project where they have considered the materials that they're going to use and the wider whole life carbon impact. The designer will have to design to a limit of embodied carbon, so at that design stage there will have to be optioneering done. They will have to look at different structures, different core materials, so whether it's structural steel or concrete or timber, they will have to look at these different things. They will even have to look at where the project is located. Is it located within a transport network that then cuts the car use to that site? There is so much going to happen within the next 5 years that whenever it then comes to the contractor, we will have a set limit to follow. We will already have had so much of the work done up the supply chain in terms of the designer and the client, that whenever we have to meet the target of embodied carbon, it'll be slightly easier. What is key though in this short term is that the supply chain get involved in terms of the suppliers of materials. We cannot do anything unless we have the materials there, and construction will always come back to cost. We have to meet a project budget. So whenever we have such a small supply chain like we do here in Northern Ireland, we have to ensure that there is resilience within that supply chain, that there is competition. So we want still to have competition between these suppliers.
100%.
Who has the most environmentally positive, impactful product that they can supply to us for the best price. So there is going to be a lot of learning within the next couple of years from the industry to understand how they can embed this knowledge, what it means, how they can change their systems. Then once it's regulated, there will be then, the limits will be reviewed every couple of years, and that is what the industry proposed Part Z amendment to building regulations states, that once the first limit is set, they will continue collecting all the data from the projects and then revisit the limit and try and lower it. That's how net zero in the construction industry will be achieved. And the UK Green Building Council have said net zero in the industry is possible by 2050.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. And that's the only thing that people need to know, because it is achievable. And I think once you know it's achievable, and they've done the studies to show it is, then you say, well, how do I start working towards it? What's my interim targets? What do I need to do? And there is a lot of positivity within the sector as well, because there is so much research happening, like my KGP, but others are researching this as well. There's so much being done with BIM and integrating the data into the model so that we understand, and any tweaks we make, we can see what the impact is then over the whole life cycle of the building. So there is going to be changes coming in the building regulations. There's going to be changes in planning policy. We're seeing that across Europe already, and countries like France are a lot more advanced than we are in terms of regulating this, and that's because they've done the work with the supply chain. They have the highest volume of environmental product declarations, and that is the document that I work with the most. It's the document that has the carbon data for the product that then whenever I put it into the whole life carbon study, I understand the impact over the life cycle. So there is major changes coming down the line, and they are coming thick and fast, and we're hoping, say through this KTP and through other work that the industry is doing, that everybody is on board. I'd mentioned previously the past 2080 standard. They're hoping to integrate that into public sector contracts as well, and we're seeing that that's really being pushed by the Institute of Civil Engineers for infrastructure projects, but also over to the building sector as well. If they bring that framework in, everyone's kind of reading off the same page, and they all understand then, and it's translated then across the industry. Once they've embedded that, then they can bring in other things like the RICS whole life carbon assessment. So it's the methodology used in the building regulations, and RICS have brought that in, that from the summer of 2024, those who are within the professional membership of RICS have to start utilising that, and it's a requirement, and they have to understand whole life carbon, and they have to understand where the data come from, where the assumptions are made versus where the actual data is, and what the difference is there.
100%. And how do you anticipate your specific KTP project, how will that impact and shape the future of Felix O'Hare?
So we've already done so much work within the project, but looking to the future, so we've set our 2030 target for a 30% reduction in our scope 1 and 2 emissions, and we're working towards that, but then we're going on to 2050 or before, so we can reach net zero across our operations. Felix O'Hare are brilliant. They're definitely very forward thinking for being such an old company. They are I think they're 100 years in operation, yeah.
Incredible.
And they started off as just a really small scale building contractor in Newry, and like look what they've done now. Like so many of their projects, say with Queen's, are huge, these amazing developments. I can see them becoming industry leaders in Northern Ireland in terms of whole life carbon, because of the work that we've done and the knowledge we've embedded, and how much the staff have bought into it as well, which is so important. Because my thing, and this is what I said at the Sustainable Building Conference, sustainability should not be the add-on to a business.
100%.
It shouldn't be siloed in a team that, you know, do some nice wee things around biodiversity and nobody actually cares. Sustainability is fundamental to every single job role, whether you're a quantity surveyor, an engineer, a managing director, or especially those within finance and procurement, because if you control the money and you control what's bought, you control the carbon. So we've done so much work with our procurement team so that they understand this. They have the knowledge there to look at EPDs and say, right, well, I can make a cost comparison as well as a carbon comparison. I think Felix O'Hare are in a really good position, because a lot of the work is public sector, and we're seeing that this is being driven by the public sector. The private sector aren't maybe as far advanced. They definitely are still looking at green building rating systems, and yes, there is benefits to those, but we need to push ahead, because those green building rating systems were becoming outdated. There has to be this focus on embodied carbon, and Felix O'Hare are working with their supply chain already, and they've made those commitments where the supply chain is saying, yeah, we can start producing this data, and Felix O'Hare going, great, we'll use this data and we'll keep working with you in the future.
Oh, that's amazing to hear about. But as you, as a KTP associate, if I were to ask you to explain to any recent graduates, what does it mean, or what is it like being, I'm so sorry, I can't get the two words together. So if I were to ask you as a KTP associate to explain what it means to a recent graduate to be a KTP associate and what it involves, what would you say?
I would say, especially if you're a recent graduate and you're coming out of that academic environment, which is pretty intense, but it's so interesting and you're learning new things all the time, but you want to progress into industry and see where that research then can be applied, the KTP is the perfect opportunity. It combines academia and industry perfectly, where research is not for the classroom, research is for industry. And if we think about that, and at the RCOM conference I spoke at last year, that was what the keynote speaker said. Why are we writing this? Why are we researching this if not for the industry? And we have to start getting better at disseminating information and ensuring that the industry is at the cutting edge, rather than the academia being at the cutting edge and the industry being 10 years behind, and it's only when it translates through. So I would say to any recent graduate that the KTP is the perfect combination of academia and industry. The opportunities afforded to you during the KTP are incredible, and I don't think you get that in any other type of graduate job, where you're given so much scope to develop your professional interests in this subject area, to like me being able to go out and give conferences and speak at these events. That isn't going to happen in most job roles. So the KTP is such a great way to get your name out there, to, if you are interested in the research that you're doing, to get your name on these research papers and be involved in cutting edge research, which can have such a monumental impact. And I think really good about the KTP is that you can fail as often as you need, but you fail fast and you keep going. And they do give you a lot of room where something doesn't work, you go, right, how can we then better this? How can we change this? How can we make this better within the business? Whereas that maybe doesn't happen as much in academia. You're very into your own interest and you don't maybe see the wider picture as well. So my recommendation was definitely go for a KTP and see where it takes you. And really the sky's the limit with KTP.
Oh, I love that advice so much. And I think you are just the perfect example of exactly what a KTP can offer and the opportunities that are there for the taking. So if that doesn't inspire people enough, I'm sure what you just said has. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me.